Greetings, everyone. That's right. It's your boy crawling out of the shadows of the YouTube algorithm once again to give you some content to this very neglected YouTube channel. So a few days ago, I received an email from an individual whose name I'm not going to reveal, and it was essentially offering a critique of one of the more recent episodes of ATA. Specifically, the one that was covering the principal who stopped the police officers from entering her school in Columbus, Ohio. I'll leave a link to that video down below because there's probably a good chance you didn't see it because it was absolutely nuked in the YouTube algorithm. But to give you the gist of it, there was a bomb threat made by one of the students. The school investigated and found that the bomb threat was not credible. Columbus police officers showed up later to try to get the students' information to investigate. The principal refused to allow them entry and said that there was no credible threat and basically that their services were not needed. This, of course, upset the ego of the police officer and of many different people and caused a local firestorm in that community, enough to where a fellow YouTuber whose channel is called Columbus Police Body Cam decided to make a video covering this interaction. And that's where I first saw the video. Well, after watching the video, there were a lot of claims made, and I decided that maybe we should investigate and see who was actually right in the situation. And in the ATA episode, we concluded that the principal had the authority to deny entry to the officers. Again, the episode is linked below if you want to go and check it out for yourself. Now, this episode came out right on the cusp of recent allegations involving the Buffalo school system and a police detective named Richard High, who also happens to be a YouTuber who has a channel called Angry Cops. Now, the allegations made by Detective High have absolutely nothing to do with what happened in Columbus, but that hasn't stopped people from conflating these two issues as if they are, the same thing. So I told you all that to tell you about this email and to kind of respond to some of the criticisms that I have received from my coverage of that interaction. But I think the best way to do that is to show you the email that was sent to me because it kind of, lays out all the criticisms that people seem to have about the episode and then show you my response to that email. And it kind of lays out, my perspective. So I'll put the email up on the screen now, but I'll also read it with you. And we're not going to go through this whole thing. Obviously, some parts of this are redacted to protect the identity of the person who sent the email, but we'll go through the main points. It says, "Dear ATA, I've been a longtime fan of your channel for quite a while, since 2021. However, your take on this video really had my head and others at the bottom of the comments section rolling. As an independent First Amendment auditor, your duty is not just to audit law enforcement. It is your duty to audit the government, and that should be noted in these encounters. Whether it is police officers, sheriff deputies, career fire departments, public works, Department of Transportation, and what I really want to bring up here, public school employees." Now, this next section of the email just kind of connects, what's going on with the Buffalo school systems to a nationwide epidemic of public school employees not reporting crimes that occur on school grounds. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but that's essentially the allegation. You're free to pause this video and read what you can about this email. But if we get to the next section down here, we can read what the actual critiques and allegations are. And beginning at that third section, he says, "I've been on the channel long enough to see that you don't only share anti-cop, but propaganda too. My question is, with the horrible reputation of American schools and the seemingly bad reputation of American law enforcement, how could you put schools on a pedestal? Or really, put one on a pedestal to another? What makes you think Columbus didn't do what Buffalo is doing, keeping these things under the light to keep their approval ratings up?" Now, before we go into my response, I think it's important to point out a couple of things. The individual who sent this email said explicitly that they are a high school student. So, obviously, I wanted to cater my response to an individual who was in that state of mind. Young people in particular, I think, are susceptible to passion. And passion can be a good thing, Of course, it drives a lot of innovation and it makes great things happen in our society. But passion can also blind you to truth sometimes. And that's what I'm saying, that I think young people are particularly susceptible to becoming overly passionate and letting their passion blind them to objective realities and truths. Anyway, let's get into how I responded. So I said, "Greetings. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and for supporting ATA over the years. To start, I want to clarify something fundamental. I am not a First Amendment auditor nor an activist of any kind. If I'm anything beyond a YouTuber, it's a journalist. Even if I were a First Amendment auditor, I don't subscribe to the notion that such individuals have a binding duty to audit every branch of government. First Amendment auditors don't swear an oath. They don't operate under a formal code or share a universal ideology. The claim that they are obligated to audit specific government agencies is misguided at best." This probably seems pretty obvious to you guys because I'm sure you've been watching the channel for a long time, but a lot of people seem to be under the misconception that I am somehow a First Amendment auditor. But I just want to be clear that I'm not a First Amendment auditor, and I'm not an advocate for the First Amendment auditing movement. I've never done a First Amendment audit. I consider myself to be an individual who is reporting on the First Amendment audit movement and just the whole structure of policing in America as a whole. I do actually have a degree in journalism, so that's the only thing that I can say that I'm credentialed in beyond YouTube, which everyone knows that doesn't mean anything. But to get to the second point, First Amendment auditors are not like some officially recognized group or anything. While there is a certain amount of ideology that is shared among this group of people that we call First Amendment auditors, there is about zero organization when it comes to their movement. Most people who are involved in the First Amendment auditing community have wildly different perspectives on how to achieve the goals that they have, even if they share those goals among other members of the First Amendment community. So it's a very diverse and eclectic group of people that make up that movement, and I don't really see myself as part of that movement or even contributing to it in any meaningful way beyond hopefully educating those people. So I just want to, make sure that everyone knows that First Amendment auditors are just regular people that have cameras in their hands. There's really no distinction between them and anyone else. So I think that coming to the conclusion that they have a duty to do anything is a little bit of a stretch. But anyway, let's continue. The mission of Audit the Audit is not to advocate for or against any particular institution. It is to educate the public and, by extension, members of law enforcement on the legal framework surrounding police interactions. Our goal is clarity, not crusade. As you mentioned yourself, the show isn't explicitly pro-police or anti-police, and that's by design. If we went beyond the legal scope and ventured into the realm of speculation, ideology, or conspiracy, we'd be doing a disservice to our audience and the standards that we hold ourselves to. This is another point that I think a lot of people kind of miss about ATA, and that is that we do not advocate on behalf of anyone. And there's a lot of intention behind that. I think the most that we've done that you could say was advocating for someone was sharing a GoFundMe link to help someone fund a lawsuit. And even in those cases, I try to be pretty careful about, how I word that and what the call to action behind that actually is. We're not here to advocate for victims of police misconduct. The main mission is simply education. And if some byproduct of that happens to be, advocating for someone or something, then so be it. That is just a symptom, not the actual mission that we're trying to accomplish. But all right, let's move on. You've linked this episode to recent allegations out of Buffalo involving Detective Richard High. Let me be clear. The video we covered in this episode had absolutely nothing to do with those allegations. In fact, this script was already underway days before that podcast aired. There is no thematic connection, no hidden defense of school administrators nationwide, and no commentary on the Buffalo situation because that wasn't the subject. Again, I just want to make the point that the episode that we covered happened in Columbus, and the allegations that Detective Richard High have made are in Buffalo. These are two separate places governed by two different legal frameworks and different policies. So whatever I say about what happens in Columbus will almost certainly not apply to whatever happened in Buffalo, even if it was almost the same scenario, because there are totally different state laws and policies that need to be considered when you're making a legal assessment like that. Also, this is purely unfortunate timing. Honestly, I wish if I had known that Richard was going to make these allegations public, I would have probably not even covered that interaction, or at least waited for a while to let the outrage die down a little bit. I still would have covered this interaction regardless, but I may have waited till a different time in order to do that, so that we didn't have these mix-ups, because these two, situations are kind of similar. Anyway, back to the email. We're almost done here. The grading in this episode, as in every other, is based strictly on the legality of the interaction as it occurred. It reflects a speculative analysis of how a court might view the conduct under applicable law and policy. A grade of A doesn't necessarily mean that we endorse someone's worldview or entire career, just as an F doesn't mean that we pass moral judgment on someone's character. We are grading actions within the context of the interaction, nothing more. As for your point about school employees being inexperienced and untrained, you're not wrong, but that same critique is at the core of the national conversation about policing. If anything, your observation proves the point. No institution is immune from human error, whether it's a teacher, a cop, a firefighter, or a bureaucrat. It's flawed people running a flawed system. ATA isn't here to pick sides, it's here to audit conduct. And that's the only way that we can stay objective. So while I respect your passion, I'd encourage you not to let your outrage cloud your view of the facts in a specific situation. Every interaction deserves to be judged on its own merits, not through the lens of broader institutional distrust. So I think this is a topic that we should probably be discussing as a nation. The fact that we've allowed outrage media to dictate our viewpoints on pretty much everything that happens. And it's funny because the same society, America, who sits around and complains all the time about the fact that they can't trust mainstream media, still buys into the playbooks of mainstream media. All of us are being fed outrage on a day-to-day basis in an unlimited supply. And we all know that outrage sells. It gets clicks. I know this just as much as anyone else on YouTube or any other media platform. Now more than ever, it's important for us all to remain critical, to keep your faculties about you, to think about things, draw your own conclusions, and not buy into media narratives. Not only that, but I think it's important that we direct our outrage at the appropriate places. In the interaction that I covered, the policies and the laws backed what the principal did. And that's just the facts of the situation. I don't like the idea of a school being unpoliced or having untrained individuals inside of it. I have children of my own. But I'm also not going to let that fear dictate what I think about a particular situation or what the law says. The allegations made by Detective Richard High are certainly serious, and they warrant serious investigation. And nothing that I said in the episode involving the Columbus individuals should suggest that there is no validation to the claims made by Detective Richard High. If we have a police detective making allegations like that against a school, we need to take that very seriously and do everything we can to get to the bottom of it. But that's not what happened in Columbus. By no means do I think that we should be excluding law enforcement officers from credible threats that take place on school campuses, but I also think that we do need to respect the laws that we have in place. If there's a policy or a law that we don't like, then we as a society need to change it. But that doesn't mean that we should just fly into an outrage and forget about all of the rules and regulations that we put into place to protect people in the first place. I'm not going to go too much deeper on this subject. I just kind of wanted to get this out there and let it be known you know, where I stand on this issue and why I covered the Columbus incident in the first place. That's all I got for you today, guys. Thank you for watching. I'm going to try to start uploading on this channel more regularly, but we'll see how it goes. You know how it is. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.